Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at an article from the front page of the Delhi edition. This article is related to China's upcoming dam and hydropower projects on the Brahmaputra river. See, China has brought out its draft 5-year plan for the period 2021 to 2025, and it is all set to be tabled in front of the National People's Congress, which functions as China's ceremonial legislature, and it is dominated by the Communist Party. So such plans and policies submitted to this ceremonial legislature automatically gets approved without any changes. And in the upcoming draft 5-year plan, China has proposed to build several dams and hydropower plants, especially on the lower reaches of the Brahmaputra near the Great Bend. And the draft 5-year plan refers to these proposed projects as priority strategic projects. See, the Brahmaputra river is a transboundary river that flows through China, India, and Bangladesh. It originates at Manas Sarovar Lake, located over here near Mount Kailash in Tibet. And while it flows through China, it is referred to as the Yarlung Tsangpo River. After originating at the Manas Sarovar Lake, the Yarlung Tsangpo River flows in an eastwards direction, and at this particular location in the Himalayas, the river falls rapidly by around 2000 meters, and it almost takes a 180-degree turn at a location known as the Great Bend. At this location, the Yarlung Tsangpo River almost makes a U-turn and starts flowing southwards into India. This major Himalayan river is seen as the lifeline of China, India, and as well as for Bangladesh. However, India and Bangladesh, which are the lower riparian states that are located in the downstream areas of the river, have always held concerns about China's projects on the river, as it is an upper riparian state located in the upstream areas of the river. As far as the sharing of the Brahmaputra is concerned, there is no water sharing treaty between these three countries, and this has always left India and Bangladesh worried about China's proposed dam and hydropower projects on the Yarlung Tsangpo. Particularly along this stretch, the Yarlung Tsangpo has great hydropower potential as it falls rapidly through the Himalayan gorges. So considering this hydropower potential of the Yarlung Tsangpo and its potential to fulfill the drinking water and industrial needs of China, it has already planned and executed several dams and hydropower projects in this stretch of the river. Currently, there are 4 major dams and hydropower projects coming up in the upper and the middle stretches of the Yarlung Tsangpo, and this includes the Zangmu project, which is already operational, and along with this, there are 3 other projects coming up known as Dagu, Jiacha, and Jiexu. So these ongoing dam construction activities of China in the upper and the middle reaches of the Yarlung Tsangpo had already caused concern for India and Bangladesh. They are particularly worried because there is no water sharing treaty between the countries, and they are concerned that these construction activities in the upper reaches of the river could affect the flow of the water in the downstream areas. But until now, China had not taken up any major dam or hydropower project in the lower stretches of the Yarlung Tsangpo, especially in and around the Great Bend. But now it has been proposed in the draft 5-year plan that China would be looking to set up these projects at the lower stretches as well, especially along the Great Bend. See, even though India was concerned about the existing and upcoming projects in the upper and middle stretches of the river, it wasn't really worried about its impact because most of these projects are just run-of-the-mill projects, because these dams do not store water permanently, and most of the water is allowed to flow through its natural course after generating hydropower. So India had expected that these projects in the upper and the middle reaches were unlikely to affect the downstream flow, and more importantly, the stretch of the Brahmaputra that flows in India is not heavily dependent on the drainage basin located in and around the upper and the middle reaches, because 35% of the drainage basin of the Brahmaputra falls within India, and hence these existing and upcoming projects in the upper and the middle reaches were of concern to India, but it was not a real worry for India. However, the new projects that have been proposed in the draft 5-year plan, which are supposed to come up at the lower reaches, especially in and around the Great Bend, is causing a lot of worry and concern in India, because these projects will be located very close to the disputed border along Arunachal Pradesh. And apart from its strategic impact, it could also have an environmental impact because these projects could have a greater impact in disrupting the downstream flow of the water. Plus, if these projects take off, the construction activities could have a big environmental impact as well, because such heavy construction closer to the Indian border could end up polluting the waters, which will in turn affect the quality of the water that flows into India. Then upon this, India would also be worried about the impact of these projects on disasters in the region, especially with regard to the flooding of the Brahmaputra. We already know that the Brahmaputra brings great misery to the northeastern states, especially to Assam during the monsoon season, by causing massive floods in the valley areas every year. Given that we do not have a water sharing treaty with China, India would be worried about the operation of these projects. And considering the ongoing border tensions and the pending diplomatic issues between the two countries, India would definitely be even more worried about these new projects that have been proposed in the draft 5-year plan, which are supposed to come up in the lower reaches of the Yarlung Tsangpo, especially around the Great Bend. Now let's take up a column from page number 6 that has been published to commemorate the International Women's Day. Before we discuss this article, let me wish all the ladies out there a very happy International Women's Day. The writer of this column first talks about the history behind designating the 8th of March as the International Women's Day. See, the International Women's Day traces back its origin to the socialist movement around the world, which was focusing on the struggles of women factory workers in the early 1900s. This movement led to the institution of Women's Day on the 8th of March in the Soviet Union in 1917, and it was even declared as a national holiday in the Soviet Union. This was immediately followed by several other socialist and communist countries, including China. So earlier, the celebration of Women's Day was largely limited to socialist and communist countries, and it was only in 1975 that the United Nations designated this year as the International Women's Year. Following this, in 1977, the UN designated the 8th of March as the International Women's Day. And from the 1980s, the movement gained momentum in India as well. And since then, governments and corporations around the world have institutionalized this day to celebrate the struggles of women and to highlight their contribution. In this context, the writer reminds us of the contribution of Savitribai Phule to feminism in India. See, Savitribai Phule was born on the 3rd of January 1831 in Maharashtra, and she is widely regarded as the mother of Indian feminism and women empowerment in the country. She has been formally recognized as India's first female teacher, and through her immense contribution to the Indian society and women empowerment, she has been known as a social reformer, an educationalist, and a well-renowned poet. Savitribai Phule, along with her husband Jyotirao Phule, led a social revolution in colonial India, and they are known for their work in promoting women's rights, the education of the girl child, and as well as for their work to strive towards a casteless society. See, Jyotirao Phule was leading social reformation activities in and around Pune in colonial India, and when he married Savitribai Phule, she was still an illiterate. Because back in those days, in the conservative Indian society, education of women was considered as a sin according to ancient scriptures, and Jyotirao Phule saw their lack of education as the direct cause responsible for their societal discrimination. So after marrying Savitribai Phule, he would go on to provide homeschooling to her and provide her with basic education, and later Savitribai Phule would also enter a teacher training institute to formally become India's first female teacher. Back in those days, this was nothing short of a legendary achievement, not just for the couple and her husband, but for Savitribai Phule herself. Later, the couple would go on to establish one of the first Indian girls' schools in Pune, and from 1948 to 1952, they would go on to open around 18 schools for girl education across Maharashtra. Within a span of 2 to 3 years, the initial schools they set up would go on to register a strength of 150 girl students, and at one point, the number of girl students started outnumbering the number of boy students in the region. In their schools, they would even adopt a very different syllabus and curriculum and very innovative teaching methods. And they were considered to be far more superior than the teaching methods employed in government schools. And the Phule couple ensured that the values that they were teaching, especially to the girls, would help in defeating the conservative values of the Indian society. They not only championed the cause of girl education, but they also fought for the abolition of discrimination of all forms. This included gender-based discrimination and as well as caste-based discrimination. They would go on to champion the cause of caste and gender empowerment. And in 1873, they even established the Satya Shodhak Samaj, which was an interactive open platform for all sections of the society, irrespective of their caste, their religion, their sex, or class. And its primary objective was promoting social equity in the society. They even set up Satya Shodhak marriage as a platform to overcome the hurdles of caste and religion with regard to interfaith and intercaste marriage, and they predominantly used the platform to promote widow remarriage as well, which again was considered as a sin in the conservative society. Through their social and education activities, they fought against the evil of dowry in the Indian system, and they even fought for the rights of the untouchables, especially with regard to their right to access public water. Considering how discrimination of women was deep-rooted in the Indian society, they even took a firm stand against female infanticide, and they set up a center known as Bal Hatya Pratibandhak Griha, which literally translated to Child Killing Prohibition Home, where they would encourage pregnant women and even survivors of rape to carry out safe deliveries. Savitribai Phule was also a well-known writer and a poet, and she published Kavya Phule in 1854, and later in 1892 she even brought out Bhavan Kashi Subodh Ratnakar. Then for promoting the education of the girl child, she even wrote a historic poem titled Go Get Education, which became the mantra for the couple to push the conservative Indian society towards accepting the education of the girl child. Savitribai Phule even established the Mahila Seva Mandal to raise issues related to women's rights and to eliminate caste discrimination amongst women. However, the path towards social reform taken up by Savitribai Phule and Jyotirao Phule was not an easy path, and they had to face stiff resistance from their own family and as well as from the conservative elements in the Indian society. Especially those from the upper caste, they started targeting the couple, and particularly Savitribai Phule was met with both physical and verbal abuse by conservative members of the upper caste. It is this phenomenal contribution of Savitribai Phule and the couple that makes them stand out amongst India's social reformers. And hence, the writer raises an interesting question and asks, shouldn't we celebrate the 10th of March as well to commemorate the struggles of women because it marks the death anniversary of Savitribai Phule? The writer says that in the past year alone, Indian women have played a defining role in India's narrative. Take, for example, the Shaheen Bagh protests against the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act, which was predominantly led by women of all religions. Then, as the global pandemic broke out, we realized how the pandemic and the subsequent lockdowns could disproportionately affect women around the world. Especially when we saw the plight of migrant workers during the lockdown, we realized the disproportionate impact on women migrant workers, and this led to widespread debate about women's rights around the country. Then, as work from home became the norm around the country, the home became the center of attention. And for the first time, the contribution of women in household work and in providing care at home started occupying the center stage of the debate. In India's patriarchal society, where women have been assigned the primary role for carrying out household work and for providing care by default came into question. And it also made the men of the household and the government to take notice of the contribution of women within the household. But unfortunately, these debates and this attention did not yield anything substantial as far as women's rights were concerned. And the state has failed to use this opportunity created by the pandemic to institutionalize household work. Further, the horrors of the lockdown became apparent when cases of domestic violence started going up. And this again highlighted that the lockdown did not put an end to violence against women, be it within the house or outside of it. As the lockdown kept families confined to their homes, cases of domestic violence also went up exponentially. And along with that, incidents of sexual assault and rape continued around the country. Then, even if you look at the ongoing farmers' protests, women farmers have led from the front, and they have not only backed up their male counterparts, and they have also successfully managed to highlight how the rights of women farmers could also be affected by the new farm laws. So, considering this, it is time for India to carry out a thorough introspection about its prevailing societal inequalities with regard to gender and caste. These inequalities, they form a vicious cycle and they feed on each other. And even as India aspires to become a $5 trillion economy, the Indian society still reports frequent incidents of female infanticide, dowry-related harassment and deaths, and even grave incidents of sexual assault against women. So it is in this context that one should remember and commemorate the phenomenal contribution of Savitribai Phule to women's rights in India, especially for aspiring civil servants. On the occasion of International Women's Day, legends such as Savitribai Phule and her husband Jyotirao Phule should set the example, and we should draw inspiration from them. Now let's take up another column from page number 6, which evaluates the perils associated with lateral surveillance. See, recently, the Ministry of Home Affairs has notified the Cybercrime Volunteers Program. This program has been launched by the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, or the I4C, which falls under the MHA. This program is designed to fight cybercrime and to help the law enforcement authorities to deal with any unlawful content online. Under this program, citizens can register themselves as cybercrime volunteers, and they will be given the responsibility to flag any unlawful content on social media platforms and on the internet and report them to the National Cybercrime Reporting Portal. Now, such surveillance, where the state is enabling few citizens to carry out surveillance on other citizens, is referred to as lateral surveillance. Because traditionally, when we refer to surveillance, it refers to vertical surveillance by the state. In vertical surveillance, it is the state and its law enforcement agencies and the intelligence agencies which are keeping a watch on the citizens and monitoring their data, their activities, and their behavior in the name of national security. Such vertical surveillance led by the state is legitimized by the constitution and by the laws in order to protect the security of the country and as well as to maintain public order. In this form of vertical surveillance, the balance of power is clearly in favor of the state. But despite that, if there are any violations of the rights of the citizens during this surveillance, there are at least some legal routes available for the citizens to hold the state accountable. On the other hand, in lateral surveillance or peer-to-peer surveillance, the state is sponsoring a select group of citizens to keep an eye on the other citizens. According to the writer, this form of lateral surveillance is inherently dangerous because of its potential for misuse and because of its potential to exclude the other citizens. However, lateral surveillance is not something that is new. Many countries and many governments have practiced it since many years. Back in the 1970s, the United States had launched the Neighborhood Watch program in order to promote community policing, through which community members were asked to keep an eye out for criminal activities and report them accordingly to the law enforcement authorities. In the state of Uttar Pradesh as well, the government has launched an application known as the C-Plan app, through which certain individuals are identified by the state and they are empowered at the village level to report any communal tensions, land disputes, or other law and order related problems to the law enforcement authorities through this mobile application. Then recently during the pandemic, in a controversial move, the Karnataka government published the personal details, including the home address of thousands of international passengers who were supposed to be under home quarantine, and it asked the neighbors to keep a watch on them and report any violations to the local administration. So around the world, governments have enabled community watch to keep an eye on certain citizens and unlawful activities, especially in domains where the state cannot have an omnipresent presence. While this form of lateral surveillance serves the purpose of law enforcement, it does raise a very big threat with regard to its potential for misuse and abuse. The problem with lateral surveillance is that certain citizens who are self-proclaimed defenders of the country could misuse such provisions to report any activity which according to them is unlawful and against the interests of the national security. This in a way gives the discretion to the citizens to define what is unlawful according to their biases and prejudices, and this could result in the social exclusion of several other citizens. Because in the eyes of the state, the volunteers are responsible citizens, whereas those who are being reported could be presumed to be violators, and this could even lead to their social discrimination. The other bigger threat is that this could push the citizens to conform with the majority ideology, be it with regard to their version and interpretation of nationalism or religion, caste, or language. Such rise in majoritarianism will definitely promote intolerance in the country, and as a result of the biases and the prejudices of the majority, it could increase the divides that exist in the society. As a result, communal divide, caste-based divide, linguistic divide, and even regionalistic divide could increase further because such state-sponsored lateral surveillance could be misused by vested interests to target the other communities. The writer argues that this is nothing short of a direct violation of fundamental rights that has been guaranteed under Article 21 and Article 19. The writer argues that such lateral surveillance is a violation of right to privacy, which was guaranteed as a fundamental right under Article 21 in the historic Puttaswamy case by the Supreme Court. Such lateral surveillance could also be misused to target any dissent, opposition, and criticism, and this would end up stifling the fundamental right to free speech and expression that has been guaranteed under Article 19 of the Constitution. Then upon this, the government has recently notified the Information Technology Rules of 2021, under which the intermediaries have been mandated by the government to take down any offensive content that has been flagged by the government. Now, the real problem arises when the Cybercrime Volunteers Program operates along with the new IT rules. Because according to the new IT rules, OTT platforms and social media platforms are obligated to take down any offensive and unlawful content based on the directions of the government within a very short span of time. Now, what if a citizen has posted on social media criticizing the government and senior leaders of the government? If this criticism is genuine and if it is not instigating any violence, then such right to criticize the government has been guaranteed under Article 19 of the Indian Constitution. Similarly, what if a citizen is expressing critical views about a religion or about any social issue? Even such critical views, as long as they do not instigate violence, is protected under the fundamental right of Article 19. So now, if there is a cybercrime volunteer who's aligned with the ruling party or who's aligned with the majoritarian interests, then he might report these genuine criticisms as well, leading to the intimidation, discrimination, and exclusion of this citizen. As per the new IT rules, the government can order the intermediaries to take down such posts and content, and that would be a breach of the fundamental rights of the citizen. So the writer says that the new IT rules of 2021 violates the actual knowledge doctrine that was brought out by the Supreme Court in the landmark Shreya Singhal case. In this case, the Supreme Court had declared the controversial Section 66A of the IT Act to be unconstitutional. Because under this provision, the state was empowered to take down any offensive content, and the lack of definition of what is offensive led to its discretionary usage by the state. And as a result, any genuine criticism of the government was also deemed to be offensive and anti-national, and individuals posting any such content were being booked by the authorities in direct violation of their fundamental right under Article 19. So in the historic Shreya Singhal case, the Supreme Court declared this section to be unconstitutional, and it highlighted the actual knowledge doctrine. According to this doctrine, an intermediary should take down the content only after having enough knowledge that the court has ordered such a removal of content. But contrary to this actual knowledge doctrine, the new IT rules allows the government to direct the intermediaries to take down any offensive content without even waiting for any judicial orders. So when you club the new IT rules With the Cybercrime Volunteers Program, the citizens and their basic fundamental rights would be left at the mercy of a few cybercrime volunteers and the state, and they may not be able to exercise sufficient legal remedies in order to protect and defend their fundamental rights and hold the state accountable. The same argument has been made in this editorial on page number 6, which evaluates the new IT rules. According to the editorial, the Information Technology Guidelines for Intermediaries and Digital Media Ethics Code, Rules 2021, could be easily misused by the state to target any dissent, opposition, and criticism, thereby leading to the harassment of several individuals, and even increase the risk of breaching their fundamental right of free speech and expression. Hence, the editorial is asking the Supreme Court to not allow the outrage industry who get offended with any message or with any content, and to not allow the self-proclaimed representatives of the country or of any community to target free speech and expression on the grounds that their sentiments have been hurt by the content of someone else. The editorial argues that the move to tighten OTT content regulation is unconstitutional, and it is calling upon the Supreme Court to exercise its jurisprudence to defend the fundamental rights of the citizens. Now let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question: China's dam building activities on the Brahmaputra has caused concerns in India, particularly the dams being planned on the lower reaches and at the Great Bend are of greater concern to India. Elucidate. The second question: discuss the contribution of Savitribai Phule to women's empowerment in India. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.